Welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast. This is a show where we aim to educate, inspire and entertain through real life stories and interviews from people in the Scottish property community.
As always, thanks for listening and give us a follow on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember to join us at our monthly networking events on the first Wednesday of every month. Tickets are available on our website. So without further ado, we'll just cut straight into this week's podcast. Stephen O'Neill, one of the biggest factors in Scotland. Welcome to the Scottish Property Podcast.
Thank you. And
you've just turned off all the listeners there by saying that.
Delighted and excited to be here in my usual modest way. And thanks for that lovely introduction, Nick.
40,000 properties now across Scotland. Newton Property is your company. You've been on an acquisition spree lately. We'll get into all that, about how you managed to scale that business to where you are now. Obviously, a lot of people listening to the show are entrepreneurs, business owners, and I've got property companies as well. So they'll be interested to hear about that. We'll also touch on how factoring is one of the most hated professions in the country.
Yep.
I think you said yourself in an article, the police and the factors.
Two most hated folk in Glasgow.
Exactly. So we'll get on to that, and we'll give you from the landlords and owners' point of view as well. We can probably chip in as well with a few kind of grumbles we've got on factors, and you can kind of respond. But obviously we want to go back and see about how your journey began and how you progressed through, because you've been in the game a long time. And I think your dad was one of the first estate agents in Glasgow. So take us back to those early years then, growing up and around that kind of family business then.
Yeah, my dad in 1958 started a company called William O'Neill and Partners. He was a chartered surveyor. You know, to be honest, as a Catholic chartered surveyor, he couldn't really get a job in some of the established private practices. So he found his way into the tax office, the district valuer's office, etc. And then he thought, well, if I can't get a job, I may as well try and build a business. He fortuitously cleaned up and he ended up with 10 offices.
Was that 10 estate agencies?
No, there were 5 estate agency offices and 5 surveying branches. The estate agencies, he was the second estate agent in Glasgow. I think the first was Jim Davidson of Davidson Partners. And my dad saw what he was doing and he copied him and he cleaned up in the West End.
Brilliant. And is that where you grew up, in the West End?
Yeah, I grew up in the West End, and then we moved to the south side to Newlands in Glasgow.
Right. Like you say, you can't tell with that suit on and all that.
I know, I can't lose my West End style. And modesty. Humility.
Well, it's all the footballers are living there now as well, so it's the place to be. Talk about those. Were you involved then early on in the business at all? Did your dad get you in there at all?
Yeah, it was quite an exciting time in our lives. I mean, you know, Dad came from Anderson, Mum came from Partick, fairly humble origins, but as his business grew, so did where we stayed. You know, went from a flat in Partick Hill, you know, to a house in Jordan Hill, to a fine house in Newlands. And, you know, our schools improved. I ended up at St. Aloysius, a fee-paying school. And, but the backbone of that was actually, you know, as these new offices opened, as these new ideas, there was this excitement in the O'Neill family. Quite honestly, you know, the dinner table chat was often around his business, telling us what was going on, and it was moving pretty rapidly. Sadly, my dad lost it all in the late 80s.
How's that?
He gave away his shares. His idea in business was also to give away shares to the young, up-and-coming, dynamic men, actually, that worked alongside him. And these dynamic men were more dynamic than he believed, and they kicked him out when he ended up with 30%. Unfortunately, in a recession.
Hostile takeover, is that like?
It pretty much was that. The business never really went anywhere after that.
And what sort of things did you learn from those early days then, watching your dad grow?
Loads. I learned a tremendous insight into the business, into business as well, the growing business. And I also learned, you know, that to keep control in terms of shares. And I also learned to capitalise your business. The first business I had, which will maybe come to, I sold within 5 years.
This was O'Neill's, which was your letting agency.
That's right.
So did you? So see, out of school, so you went to St Al's, and then did you go to uni or anything like that? Or?
I'm actually what's called a Bombay surveyor. That means that I never graduated.
Right,
I know you won't believe this, but I was a wee bit of a smart ass actually at college, with my dad owning a big surveying practice, and everybody else there was doing surveying. And I decided, when you did a year out, that was a doddle. Well, I was the first person ever to repeat a year out. It gets worse.
That turned into...
Yeah, well, it gets worse. I was then, so the repeated year out, I finished that, and then I was the first person to be thrown out of a year out. But anyway,
bit of a rogue then,
come on, I was just kind of good fun and just determined to get going and not stopping long enough to smell the roses, you know. But through that, I then went to work with Dad and in his estate agency. Then Dad lost.
Was that purely sales, or was it?
That's what I was doing
at the time?
No lettings.
Lettings
changed in about 1990 with the introduction of the 88 Housing Scotland Act, which freed it up. Before that, lettings was a no-go area. It was for students and people in the social. It really was. There was no real provision.
There was no buy-to-let mortgages.
Bizarrely, the house market turned on its head in 1910, 12. 4% of Scotland's or Glasgow's housing stock was owner occupied, and the rest was rented through factored tenemental properties.
That's amazing how the change.
How it's changed, yeah. It's now about 14% private rented, maybe 15, probably about 25, 30% social housing.
A lot of people would say they want to go back to those days, John. I get on the social media comments, that parasite landlord and all the rest of it. They hate landlords out there now, the young people,
Yeah.
Money.
But there's not that many landlords now. If there's only 15%, and they're
Are you a landlord yourself? Do you own property?
No, none. I do what I do. I have been a landlord back in the early 2000s.
Right.
But to be honest, it wasn't really working for me. I know what I'm good at, and also I think you have to be honest and know what you're not good at. And I wasn't as good at owning and renting my own properties as I was as managing them for other people, oddly enough.
So how come you started your own lettings business then? How did all that come about, and what year was that?
That was in 95. I had worked in the estate agency. My dad had sold his business then. Things changed in the family business. I had to go and plough my own furrow. I just did it. I just wasn't,
Where'd you get those first? Can you remember those first customers, those first landlords?
Yeah, they were very difficult to get. I thought that, having had such an experience, I'd worked in the estate agent and I'd built quite a good reputation, even at quite a young age, as somebody who kind of knew what he was about in the estate agency game. I would have been about 40 at the time, just under 40. And then I then worked for Quality Street. They were quite a dynamic company. So I went there on a consultancy basis. Sounds quite grand. I saw the guy sitting beside me in a Porsche at the traffic lights, and I rolled my window down, and he pressed his electric window down, and I says, "You're Paul Mignoni, aren't you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I'm Stephen O'Neill," and he said, I know you." He said, "Come in and see me." So I went in to see him, and I was given a fortunate role there of setting up their rental agency department. Right. They owned 1,400 properties. Right. They were quite a dynamic operator. So I opted to work with them in Aberdeen and then London. And at that point, I was hatching my plan to start my own company from scratch, from the house, and just build it. You see your first customers, it's a howler. Yeah. Very difficult. People you dealt with for years, people who liked you and admire you. They just wouldn't come. They'd be like, yeah.
That's interesting. So just to pause you there, right? Obviously now we've got the benefit of LinkedIn, the internet, social media. We can reach out to people. I can reach you through online communication. But back then it was a case of rolling up to traffic lights and saying, "Hoi, give me a job." Sort of thing, you know what I mean? That just shows you though that inside you had that kind of drive to get in there, get your foot in the door and learn. So I take it you wanted to get in amongst that lettings business so that you could learn for yourself and
Well, that was exactly it. I went and I said I did this year with Quality Street. I learned an awful lot. I learned about the regulations, which I didn't know nothing about. It was just a different side of housing. And, our skills are all transportable. I think maybe you need to have a backbone of confidence as well. And also you need to be fairly resilient. In fact, especially at the early days in business. See, if you've started a business with a blank sheet of paper, that's tough. And you've really got to keep getting up. And see, when you go into that room in the morning, I'd go into that room and there was a phone there. One thing I never, ever did was wait for that phone to ring. I was always on it. I was always on it and just pushing. And it's, learning to take knockbacks. And obviously in the female department, I got many knockbacks. So it was easy for me to learn how to take the knockbacks in business. And you just pick yourself up and, you just got to pay. I'm going for it.
What were you, because obviously business and the processes and things like that have evolved over the years, but there'll be certain things that have stayed the same throughout, kind of over the last, 30 years?
It's in 1995, 30 years, yeah.
30 years. So what were the things, like you said, going in the morning, picking up the phone, that's obviously a form of lead generation, trying to bring in those new customers. Any other things that obviously you still do on a daily basis?
Yes, I think that the fundamentals of my business right from day one has been service, attending to customers quite genuinely and trying to do a little bit more for them. And I feel that if you can have a business peppered with talented, decent people. No, I don't want any, young, dynamic young Turks working. There's only one young Turk in my business and he's nearly 70. That's me. but we have got a company, there's 85 of us, full of dynamic, able young people, but they're decent people.
Who was your first hire? And did that take a while?
That did take us, and it was a worry, starting in business in 95, and then I took on, what was his name? It was a disaster. And,
why?
I really relied on him when we were going, and he was quite enjoying it. He'd been a fireman, and then he'd get retired out the service, and he was youngish in his 30s, and Phil. And I didn't know Phil had been an alcoholic and had still had vestiges of it. And then one day I was in the Saturday. I used to go in on a Saturday morning. I'd go in at 7 on a Saturday morning, do a shift, and so I could get back home to the house for 9 or 10 o'clock and see the kids when they just woke up, and I'd earned some dosh. And I was in this Saturday morning, and Phil appeared in the company car I'd bought him, bouncing off the walls. I'm like, what's going on? And then it all unravelled, and then I found out all the wonderful work that Phil had done for me and with me. It didn't exist. And I thought my business is going to collapse. All my customers are going to be...
You mentioned something there earlier on, Stephen, about starting at almost 40. Did you not... what was the trigger then to get you starting then? Because a lot of people are thinking, I'm almost 40. That's what people class as middle age. Feel the guys, I've got a bit of a career. Why go? Let's go now start something.
I think I've always tried to be quite honest with myself, and I really have. And I think a good business person knows their weak side better than they know their strong side. I think far too many business people thrive on their strong side. And to that end, I never really thought I was ready or had the opportunity. I saw the opportunity when the law changed in the rental law. I saw what Quality Street were doing. I saw at the end of this introduction of the buy-to-let mortgages. And, to that end, it didn't take a genius to work out. And it's funny, there were loads of letting companies, established letting businesses around them. And this happened in factoring as well. So I started and I was quite, one of the things I did do was I took a different approach to it, and I went to the Herald. Now, in the 90s, Slater Hogg used to get 45% discount off the Herald, which was 45% commission on their adverts. So they were selling adverts. They were making fortunes off advertising. They'd have 12 pages. Your volume discount was based on how much space you took. So I started my letting company. First thing I did, I made an appointment to see, I knew everybody, to see Nigel Boyd in the Herald. I went to see Nigel. I said, I'm starting a letting company. I said, in the Herald, you've got 20 pages of estate agents adverts, some getting 4% discount, others getting 45. I said, I want Slater Hogg's commission. I said, because there's nobody in the letting page. And he laughed a bit, and I thought, well, I'm not giving up. And I said, I tell you what, I said, I want Slater Hogg's commission, I will take a quarter page ad and all the ads at that point were these little classified ads. I'll take a quarter page ad every week. That helps my profile. That will help your profile. That then will get you the barrelage, and sure as fate, the other letting companies will come in my back. And before I knew it, he gets 2 pages. I get my quarter page every week, half price. And I said, I'll do it every week, but don't come back in a year's time and put me onto the volume rate. I said, you're giving me a puddy up, I'm giving you a puddy up. Now let's both work. And it worked for me.
And that was expensive back in those days as well.
Of course, yes, where we met. It was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just for listeners, I actually took a photo, Stephen, back in, it must have been when I was very early on starting out in my photography career, in press photography. It was either the Evening Times or the Herald when you started out Newton Property back in 2001.
Right.
And I don't know if I've probably still got the photo somewhere, but I took you down to it was the West End. It was down in Unpacks Gardens, I think.
Right.
Across from the tennis courts, tennis courts and rugby pitches down there. I had you where it was a to-let sign standing in front of the flat. I remember it. And I'm sure you was driving a Mini at the time.
We'd a branded
Mini.
Yeah, Italian job Mini.
Aye.
We did a few of them, or a couple of them.
Aye. And I came away from that, I thought, this guy's pretty eccentric. Like,
Thank you. That kind of helped me along my way. But you know, the other thing I think, and then, you know, when I started O'Neill's, you know, again, it was a clean sheet of paper. The other thing I did was I pumped away at the Herald. What I realised was journalists were copy hungry. Journalists, they went into a blank sheet of paper every day. They had to write a story. And I realised quite quickly, a good story, especially with an even better pick, then I'm likely to get it in. And I never gave up at that. I did all my own PR. So I would fax in the story with the photograph. I then phone up the journalist, say, did you get that? And I tried to make the stories that I was giving them, they had to be true and honest. We forget all the exciting things that happen. Like, we're standing at the bar on a Friday night and we're telling our pals, wait to hear what happened today at work. Sometimes that's the story the paper would like to hear. So I would just make sure it was a decent, interesting little tale. Sometimes it was formal, and so maybe the more formal ones was about the market, about the growth in the market, but actually giving the people what they wanted
and
to hear. And
value as well, giving them some value. Because really, it's not really changed, because if we think about now what the content we put out, I mean, this podcast, for example, is a media company.
Right.
This is what we do. You know, we're putting out value for our listeners. It's a form of publicity. It's a form of driving out personal brands as well. It's just changed. So traditional media is obviously newspapers, TV, radio. Now it's all changed to social media. Okay, so fancy making £1,000 for sending a WhatsApp? Let's take a wee break to talk about referring sellers to John and Lewis at Prime Property Auctions. Me and Stephen have both done it, and it couldn't be easier. If you know someone selling a property, the guys will pay you £1,000 or 1% of the sale price, whatever's higher, just for passing their details. Doesn't matter if the seller is already with an estate agent or not, just drop the guys a message and they'll do everything from the first call to getting the property sold. Know someone who might be looking to sell or struggling to get a result with their agent? Go to the link in the show notes and send them a message now.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the kind of the way that's evolved. But it's interesting. Did you put a lot of your budget back into advertising then back then?
No, not really. No. Because think of it, I was buying at half price. So I was subsidising my customer. I couldn't sell it at the £300 or £400 an ad that maybe Slater Hogg were doing. But if I'm buying it at half price at £200 and I was actually selling it to my clients at maybe £100. So there was a fair amount, but probably the biggest budget went to advertising, and I worked myself. And I love working, you know, and I worked my socks off.
How long did you have O'Neill's for, and how many properties did you have at the end of it managed?
We had it 5 years. My dad came to join me, funny roles reversed. My dad joined me in O'Neill's then. He worked in Newton till he was 75. He couldn't walk from the car park.
What role did you give your dad? Handyman?
No, my dad, he was a very precise person and a very gentle man, and he did all the inventories at the time. Right. And he was very good. In fact, my dad died 2 years ago, and my dad got his last paycheck 2 years ago. He got paid 20 years after he retired. Brilliant. And I still owe him.
What age did
he died at 93.
Amazing.
Yeah, wow. Great. And he was, you know, I'm very proud of my dad. And he was awfully proud of me. Awfully. And even the last time I was with him, God, he'd completely lost it. He was demented. do you know the one thing he got was, he'd sit there. I sat in his room in the care home. The last day I was with him, and we just spoke about Newton and what we were doing. It was just,
it was like, my wages have not been paid yet, Stephen. What's happening here? I'm still.
He wasn't that demented, was he? So, you know, and I'm glad I made it. I remember once I bought a new fancy 911 turbo convertible, and I was round, and I took it round to my dad. He'd have been 86 at the time. And, you know, this is what life's all about. And so I took him round the West End, roof's down. I'm looking great that day. But I can still remember.
This is before Tinder.
So we get back round to my dad's flat, and he's slowly pulling himself up out the car with the roof down. His back's to me. And he says, you know, son, I'm really proud to be your father. Oh. That's... Things like that is what life's worth working for.
Because old school generation as well, you know, like it's different now. Obviously, parents, there's a different way, connections and relationships that you have with your kids. But going back to like thinking about my own dad, you know, you would never really have those conversations. I don't know about you, you know?
Nah, that's true. You wish you could. Yeah. That's
we had always quite a warm relationship. My dad would never say, look, don't do that. He was never outspoken. He would maybe say to me, when I say, I made a mess of that, and he'd maybe say, well, I kind of wondered about it, but it wasn't quite. If it was at his place, he would say to me, but very rarely. And he'd had tremendous experience.
Which is powerful for someone that's got that experience, because a lot of people like to hear the sound of their own voice and talk with an expert. But it sounds like your dad was an actual expert, but didn't really want to voice his opinion. And
that's right. He had a sense of humanity about him, as well as, you know, the experience he had in business.
Going back to Neil's then, why did you decide to sell it? And how many properties were you at?
So we built up to 650 properties. Rattled away. It's funny, just to digress slightly. When I started it, so all the other established letting agents, which were a pretty sleepy lot, they'd had it their way for years. And they came to me, so I see you're starting up in letting. I said, yeah. And they said, we're starting this group, the West of Scotland Letting Agent Association. Would you like to join? And I said, well, I'm not really very keen in these things, to be honest, but I just said aye. I thought I should. Anyway, I flagged to join it and they knocked me back. and the same thing happened. I started a factors business. It's dynamic. Did you
feel like you were a kind of disruptor then, as an independent?
I think sometimes that word's a wee bit overused, but I was up there, and I proved that I was, and I proved that I was there to take business off them. I didn't go and plunder business. I didn't go and chap my competition's doors. But if one of their customers spoke to me, I was right in there, and I would try and prize it off them as best as possible.
Who bought that business then?
It was bought by an Edinburgh chap called Ralph Slater. No, Ralph Weir. I got my suit from Ralph Slater the day I went to see him. But
did he approach you?
No, I decided that where I was going to get optimum value, kind of always think these things through, was I decided I would go through, I thought a Glasgow letting company. I wanted to sell, I wanted to capitalise. My dad didn't do that.
And I was always have that in mind from the start?
And this, not in Newton. I don't have it in Newton.
Right.
But then I wanted to get the capital out and build my financial base.
Do you think that's because your previous business?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Completely. And also, if you think about it, having started a business from scratch, and from that, you know, blank sheet of paper, it's easier to do it the second time than it is the first time, especially with a bob or two in your pocket, when essentially you generally have add little or nothing.
See, looking back at your dad's business though as well, but as an estate agency and a sellable business, because I understand that a lettings is a very sellable business. You've got a book, you've got recurring revenue, but an estate agency is really...
Estate agency not so much.
No, I think it's very different. There was, there was a rash of sales in the 90s, but since then there was a rash of people there were more people get their fingers burnt buying them than the sellers did well.
Lettings is a good asset. Lettings is, well, you sold the lettings part of...
Yeah, because what I noticed was that you got to think things through all the time, but what I noticed about the letting side was that, yes, our client retention was maybe 2, 3, 4 years in general, whereas in the factoring side, it could be, I told you, we bought a company started in 1826, and some of the
very
stock...
Very difficult to sack a factor.
It is, yeah. It's one of the nice things about it. But that was very much in my vision, to build it, to sell it, and then to do something else. And I think also in business, when you sell a business, especially kind of trading business, you often kind of give away everything. So I had a wee corner that had 20 units, 25 factored units that I had. And
sorry, just before getting on to the factoring, sorry to interrupt. So Ralph, did you advertise the business for sale?
No.
Or
I decided what I did was I went through to Edinburgh. I decided I was going to get better money from somebody in Edinburgh wanting to get into Glasgow than somebody around the corner in Glasgow. Yeah. That's secondly, I thought that if I went through to Edinburgh, I made 3 appointments, David Alexander, Ralph and somebody else.
So David Alexander's DJ Alexander, isn't it?
Yeah,
He's still
and I went through, and I brought through, it was quite open, didn't sign an NDA, didn't ask them to. I said, this is it. This is what I've got for sale. I thought I'll be as honest and open as I can. I said, but don't come back. If you want to buy it, don't come back and lowball me or give me the last minute chip and try and take 20 or 50 grand off it with something you found out. Here's the good, here's the bad. I've got 12 staff. 8 of them have got contracts, 4 don't.
Do you have an office? Where was that?
The office was in Elderslie Street. I had a nice main door office there. And I started from the dining room. God, he's starting to dine. The dog will be barking. And, and it was always before the mobile phones were around. And then I moved to a serviced office. I did a deal with Geoffrey Howison, who started Slater Hoggan Howison.
So what was the figure then? How much did you sell it for then?
Sold it for $750.
Right.
Yeah.
At that point in
it was 2000 when I sold
2000. And that obviously gave you a good chunk of capital. What did you do when you... Well, actually, just before that, is O'Neill still going as a name? There's O'Neill's now?
Yes, it's still going.
Going?
Yeah. Don't hear of them much, but it's still going.
Ever since
that's good to still going.
Yeah. I kind of, I'm quite energized and I like doing things like this, or I like doing PR, or, and you're working all the time when you're in business. If you've got that way about you, and I see your LinkedIn stuff, and it's always punchy, it's always out there, and that's what make it, and to have a bit of a character and a bit of a personality and a business. I want my business to have a better personality the bigger we get.
Yeah. So did you know you were going to go straight and set up that fat? You'd already done the groundwork. Setting up.
I hadn't done the groundwork essentially because I concentrated on the sale, but I knew I was keeping the 25 or so factored units, which amounted to hee-haw. And what I also did, it gave me a start, and I had 25 more than I had when I started my letting business. But what I didn't do was I didn't go and buy a bigger car. I didn't get a fancy office. I rented, a real attic office in Charing Cross. God, I used to put the flag down every time I got to work. It was so high up. It was like climbing Everest every morning. But we...
And did you treat yourself when you got that 750 grand?
No, not really. I decided... No, I didn't. I had a few since then. But what I did do was I decided that things like the benefits will come with success, and the success I was focusing on was business number two, which was Newton. So I'd always lines that if I reached, I'd go and buy myself. The thing I like is a nice car, but only when I can afford it. I put a lot of the money, I rolled a lot of it over to save tax into Newton.
What about personally? What stage of your life were you at? Like you said about kids and stuff like that. So how many kids have you got?
I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 girls. Kirsten and Rachel. They're very active in the family business. They're very talented, I have to say. Very different personalities, but it's about where you get to in business, not about, and slightly different ideas. Kirsten's very precise, very kind of mathematical, very thorough. And
are they all in Newton?
Yeah, Kirsten is people director. We have a CEO. We appointed a CEO, Vinny Goldie. He's been brilliant, brilliant, and he's helped us grow. It's about recognising. I said,
was that hard to take a step back from? I'm assuming you were the CEO as you build it to.
Yeah, it was when I was in Bali for 8 years. It was quite difficult to take a step back.
We'll get on to that.
Yeah, okay, right.
So obviously, right. So you're going with Newton. You're
and Rachel. Sorry, don't forget Rachel.
Sorry,
Rachel is head of business development, and she does acquisitions. And she's got a lovely personality, just like me. And she has got a love. But she's driven and she's determined and she's into it. And they grew up with the businesses. In fact, when my daughter Kirsten, I phoned Kirsten 12 years ago. She was working for French Connection in Nottingham, coming out of, both were at art school. And I phoned her once. I said, Kirsten, if your dad was ever to think of asking you, would you be interested in coming to what? I didn't want to say it in the family business. What would you say? She said, Dad, I've always wanted to work with you, but I've been too scared to ask in case she said no. So she came to join quickly, on board as a director.
If we had your daughters here just now, we asked them what was Dad like back in the early days, like when you were growing up, what would they say? Were you present around? Were you going to all the stuff? Because I get a lot of flack because obviously we know how it is as business owners, entrepreneurs, you never switch off.
You don't.
You're always going you're sometimes not present. The wife's talking to you, you're not even taking it in. You're thinking about, I need to get back to that next lead or that contact and that. So we all have our flaws.
We do. And I'm drilled into my head as my business still. And it always kind of has been. As I said, what I used to do in O'Neill's and in Newton was try and go in first pop, even a Saturday, it was Sunday morning, 6 o'clock, till 8 or 9 or 10. And then, the kids get up, you've done a shift and you feel good about it. But I did live and breathe, and I still do. I still love business. I love
it's interesting the achievement. They want to come and work with you. So it must have not been a negative thing for them growing up that they don't want nothing to do with it. They actually want to be working in the business.
Yeah, I never thought that, but you're right. And they love it, and they're both shareholders. They both have lovely lifestyles from it. They are both huge contributors to the company. And also they're very into the way that we want to be. We want to be decent people in business. We want to be decent to the people that work with us. We want to be a place of opportunity. Or, my objective at the later stages of my life is to help mold it. I want to be the best employer in this country. That's what I just want to be. And also I want to be the best service provider in this country. Imagine those two things being attached to a factors business. It's a bit of an oxymoron, but you got to have something to go for.
So when you were 60, you pretty much took retirement, did you? How long did that take to build up to that point since starting Newton?
It was probably about 13 years since it started Newton. Yeah.
And why did you decide? Was it always in your head that you wanted to just to kind of?
I travelled a lot and I've been to Bali a lot and I liked it, and I kind of never really thought of it. I think in business, women are better at achieving their dreams, not necessarily the goals. And the men and women in business, I think often, they still have the same goals, and the idea is to start a business, to build it up, to sell it for a lot of money and to go and live in the sun. And I think women are very good at saying, now's the time for me to go and enjoy my life and enjoy the spoils and capitalise on the business. I think men have got a habit of doing the same thing, starting a business, building it, fall in love with it, marrying it and leaving in a coffin. And I wasn't for that. And I had a tremendous 8-year life. Just what adventure it is to go in your gap year for 8 years at the age of 60. Where
did you go in Bali? What area?
I stayed in a place called Umalas, which is a residential area, which is quite near Canggu.
What did you get up to out there then? I
could tell you and tell you more. I kind of floated around.
What was your daily routine?
My daily routine was great. My daily routine, I got up at 5 every morning. I then did my hair. That took me about 40 minutes. I'd have my clothes laid out by my housekeeper, and I'd have my beach clothes laid out. I left every morning at 10 to 6, and I got to the beach at 2 minutes past 6 every morning. I'd walk for an hour and a half. That's when I did all my blue sky thinking, under the blue sky. It was lovely. Didn't really speak to anybody. Then I'd go back home. I had a great housekeeper, Kadek, who I dearly love. She stayed in a villa in my garden. And her and her husband stayed there. I mean, what a life it was. And then she would have my breakfast ready for me. And then I'd go through to my room, my bed would be made, my clothes would be laid out. When I got back through to the front, my car would be washed.
Tax-free out there?
Well, I stayed in Malaysia half the time for some reasons, a bit like that. So I stayed in Penang in Malaysia too.
So you had a pretty luxurious life, haven't you?
I had quite a life out there. And
Did you work well with it there?
Not at all. Not at all. I decided that my business was in Scotland and I was good at doing business in Scotland. And I just leave Indonesia for the Indonesians to do business. Many people made a lot of money out there. It wasn't for me. I'm not a developer.
Any relationships?
Well, I dated a lot. I was quite popular, funnily enough. I don't know why.
For an old guy. Walking down the
full
beach
of chat
at
and
6
charm.
in the morning.
Yeah, full of chat.
Looking up at the blue sky.
Yeah. And then, but oddly enough, I'd be out and about during the day. I'd travel and I went to buy a nice car once and you couldn't get them in Bali. So I flew to Jakarta and I bought this fancy Mercedes convertible and I drove it home. Took me 4 days, just drove. I'm a goer.
Right.
I would.
How did you adjust to that pace of life?
How
From
did
something that's been full on.
I was rushing around all the time. My pal used to call me the gregarious hermit because I'd be, bombing around, here, there and everywhere during the day. And my car would be cleaned ready for me to go and I would jump into the car. I would go down to one of the other, coffee places or I just had a kind of routine and my day usually finished. But as I said, I was known as a gregarious hermit by pal because I was out and about during the day waffling to everybody about me.
Did you meet a lot of expats out there as well?
Well, I didn't. People said that to me. I didn't go over there to meet people from round the corner.
Aye.
If I wanted to do that, I stayed. So I had a couple of longest term relationships. I think it was 3 weeks.
It's pretty long out there.
And I'd fun. I ate well. Everybody knew me, funnily enough. I was in a bar once in Bali. I was talking to the successful Indonesian guy and he says to me, you're a legend here. And it's just my bubbly personality. I talk to everybody.
Did you buy any property out there or was it rented?
I bought a villa there and I had a rather nice villa and I did some work to it. And then in the big garden I built the most amazing, a small villa, which was beautiful. It was curved. It was different. It was in a moat. It had a lovely architect. I'd written a book about women and business, and then I was actually booked to do a TED talk on women and business in Russia in 2020. I was actually booked, sent in my thing. They loved it. And so because of that, I made sure I got an Indonesian lady architect and she designed this villa. I gave her I said, I want it to be organic and I want it to sit in Tirta Ganga. Tirta Ganga is the King's Water Palace. And the King's Water Palace is like a football pitch size fish pond. So I wanted my house to be in Tirta Ganga. It was then I also realised that I'm not a developer. It cost me. I took a bath in my fish in Tirta Ganga. I really did. It was extra. It was tiny. It was only 60 square meters. It was cool as. It was it was lovely and what a journey it was. But I lost a lot on it.
Spent a fortune on it.
See, just expanding what you said, right? So you've spent the last 13 years building up this business, putting all your everything into it, right? And then to actually take a step away and to switch off from that totally. I mean, presumably you're still the owner, right? You're still director.
Yeah.
So you're still obviously taking money out of that to live your life out in Bali somehow or other, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. So how do you totally switch off from that? Did you have the daughters in there running the show? How do you switch off?
There was a managing director who'd stepped into the britches after I left. He'd been there for some years and my daughters were directors. So I spoke to them. I didn't switch off. All I thought about the beach was my business.
That was
some
before
ideas.
Systems and online. Well, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was
as much as it is now. Where, after COVID, it's so easy now just to go into all the systems and just check everything. But we still checking in?
I can't do that. I've just learned how to do an email. so let's be realistic. So I was on the phone every day.
Well, you were physically just phoning, going, what's happening?
Yeah.
Just catching up.
Just catching up and trying to give a bit of direction.
They must have thought he's a right pest. They
They thought I was a right pest, yeah, and I was. But I had loads of good ideas. And a lot of the ideas in the business have come from me.
Right, okay.
I've had, I just can't but help think
Did
about
the business grow when you were away?
Yes, it did continue to grow, and the profits continued to grow. And when I looked at it, I did feel objectivity is very good as well. And that, as I said, helps with your honesty and your candour about your own business. And I felt that our service delivery hadn't grown as much as our profits had, and that was one of the reasons I came back, as well as the kids having kids.
Get to that decision time then. What was going through your head then that it's time to come back?
Well, Kirsten and Rachel both had kids, so being a grandfather. Connor wasn't and isn't involved in the business. He's gone down a different path. He's studying photography. And the Bali changed a lot as well. Bali is mind-numbingly busy. And I was kind of thinking, I've had enough. I was hardly going out. I would go out in the morning to the beach, but I'd hardly go out during the day. The traffic was awful, regulations, etc. Awful. But it'd been kind to me in my time there. So, and also I had concerns about how we were structured for tomorrow, and we'd grown a lot, and I wasn't sure. We'd grown a lot in terms of profits, turnover, income, but I wasn't sure, your service, your processes, your systems should really be growing ahead of it. And I felt they were depleting. And I felt...
And what was the indicators of that? Was it complaints?
Yes. And complaints that were filtering their way to me, even at the other side of the world. And, I make myself quite accessible. And I was starting to see more, and I didn't believe it was just because we doubled our stock. I felt that there was a lack of integrity and determination to get things done. And I think in business, you mentioned the negativity about factors, but I think if you're good at what you do, and that's all I want to be, I want to be bloody good at what we do. And if we can, all I want people to say is, my factor Newton are quite expensive, but they're brilliant.
Yeah. So when you came back to do, when you came back, then what role were you playing then, day to day, in the business? Then
I was chairman. Then I wasn't. I was chairman over all the time I was away, and actually now I very consciously for the last year I've been working. I mean, this week I was up to Aberdeen on Sunday. I was there Monday. Drove through to our Inverness office Tuesday. Drove back down yesterday. But what I do try and do is engage with the people. And I notice in business that directors, they're a type, you get good directors, are hardworking, they're great contributors, they're good at what they do. Sometimes they don't have time to maybe stop and engage. So we're very strong on our people. We're very strong in people development, and I'm the one that speaks to everybody. And essentially that's why I went up to Aberdeen and Inverness, was just to say hello to everybody.
Aberdeen's quite a big market for you as well.
It has been. We've actually built ourselves up. If we're not the biggest up there, we're the second biggest, and I'm sure we'll be the biggest in no time at all.
Yeah. What have you got to say about Newton Property?
I'm pretty sure you're the biggest in Aberdeen, yeah.
No. Are you from Aberdeen?
No, but I buy a lot of portfolios in Aberdeen. When I buy them, it seems to be when Newton's a factor. I'm like,
here we go again. I think we've done well up there.
His next course.
I think the Aberdeen's a great place to do. It's a strange thing in business in Scotland. We don't really look north. We look over to Edinburgh. The opportunities in Aberdeen, all these fine granite buildings in the West End. I was going around. Oil companies, they're no longer there. They've closed them down. Now they're paying council tax on them. They're lying with their throat cut. You're buying stuff at less than half price. I see Aberdeen, the West End of Aberdeen, as being the new Park Circus. There's great opportunity. You can buy a townhouse in Aberdeen, a former institutionalised office, for less than you'll pay for a one-bed flat in White Street in Partick.
That's crazy, isn't it?
He's that's why he's been buying up there. But we always have a joke. I always slag it off.
I was even looking at the church on Queen's Road the other day.
Oh, right, we're just right there. Is that the one in the Gushet?
Beautiful, right on the corner between Fitzwinans and Forest Road up Queen's Road. Yeah, beautiful, standing. It's $300,000. You're thinking all the corporate business up there that would have events in there, weddings. I'm like, even that, the real estate there is just so cheap. And they're just trying, and a lot of these oil companies or oil related companies are doing very well anyway. They're just cutting and running.
So let's talk about, obviously you're at 40,000 properties now. Does that mean 40,000 individual
properties,
flats, houses, whatever it is, developments? through a mixture of organic growth and acquisition, buying up other factoring companies, buying businesses I wanted to touch on, because obviously people out there thinking, how do I grow, how do I acquire if I've not got loads of cash in the bank and all that? Did you do it all with your own funds, or did you get lending, or did you do vendor financing? We'll take over your business now, we'll pay you back over time.
No, we'd a very specific plan. First of all, the backbone, I would say, of our financial success has been our policy of 30-30-30. 30% of the profit we keep in the business, 30% we keep for tax, and 30% we distribute as dividends. That gave us a cash pile to go and work with. We also decided, because my dad's business, one of their problems was that the ease of access of borrowing money. And in the 60s, he just phoned the bank manager, said, we need another 10 grand. He said, that's okay, it's in your account now. But I didn't want to do that, and I saw the failings of that. Money can be a great friend, but can also be, a cancer in the business, especially if it's owed. So what we did was we started acquiring business fairly early on through reserves, and we paid for our acquisitions in cash. We also paid for them in full. A lot of the companies were saying, well, we'll give you 85% or 80% now, and then another 20% in 6 months or a year. No, I thought we'd make it appealing. And it's been a success story for us that we have bought. Business have become, all of a sudden, we were buying them at pound and pound on turnover 20 years ago. And now we're looking at, £2 or £3 on turnover.
Well, if you look at actually who's buying businesses, these businesses now with recurring revenue and income, it's like big pension funds and stuff like that, big institutional investment funds and stuff like that. So
I kind of noticed. But honestly, I mean, we get approached all the time. Would we be interested in speaking to them? And I've never spoken. I'm not going to lift my skirt for nobody. I just think, I see as soon as you speak to somebody, there's a for sale sign outside your business. And, I'm not interested. And we are a generational business. That's what I want it to be. I want it to be a business of values, of integrity, with decent people, a place where the people that work for us have opportunities.
What's the turnover of Newton now?
Turnover, the transactional turnover, which is what we pay, is about 40 million, and our company turnover this year will be just under 8.
And how many, you said about 30% dividends, how many directors have you got that get dividends?
We've got 5 directors, 4 of which are shareholders.
Right, okay.
85 staff in total.
85.
How many offices throughout Scotland?
Gourock, Glasgow, Aberdeen and Inverness.
Wow.
That's some operation.
Yeah.
Challenges, obviously, factors get a bad name. Obviously, if I look in your Google reviews, and it's not just you, it's all the factors. And, I get it as a letting agent as well. People are only tending to give feedback if they've had a bad experience. Or, there's plenty of customers that are happy as well, don't get us wrong, right? But it seems to be the reoccurring problems again and again and again. And we know as property owners, transparency,
communication,
transparency, maintenance and repairs, costs. Like, where the hell did they get these figures from? So talk to us a wee bit about that. And how
and I think that's quite right. And I don't think we're, as I said earlier, as good as we should be, can be, or will be. One of the things we have done, our last acquisition was 15 months ago. And we decided after that to sit on our hands and focus on our processes and systems and be better, especially, focusing on communication. And that really is a big one. So that's just simply, what we've been doing. I think that, all these things are accurate criticisms. And I see us, if you look at the Google reviews or the Trustpilot reviews, as we are up there at the highest level. And we're still nowhere near.
Well, actually, you're doing pretty well, because see, if you look at Google reviews, I think you get a 3-star. I think Ross and Liddell possibly are like 1.8 or something like that.
Yeah.
So in terms of the big guys, I think you do not too bad, just to kind of give you a wee bit of credit.
Right. Well, because we try and, as I said, we try and be quite human. And we suppose we try and encourage reviews. We don't try and encourage good reviews, but we'll just say, well, will you give us a review? Do
you take a markup on maintenance?
Not a penny.
What about insurance?
Yes, we do. Yeah,
part of the business model.
Yeah. It's part of the business.
Can owners find that out? Like what the actual...
Oh, no, they have to. It's quite regulated. As a provider of insurance, I mean, our insurance premium income is 6 or 7 million per annum. It's pretty meaty income. But we have to inform the owners what our percentage markup is, and we do willingly and clearly. And you might say it's a rather unique thing to Scotland, because down south they don't do that. But in Scotland, it's generally, and this links back to the old days when the factors were the owners of the factors often were the tenement builders who were essentially the owners of the building, like and they got the tenants to pay the common charges and the insurance. So in the title deeds, it says the building will be insured by the factor. I think when you compare our costs for insurance to what you would get online, we're a lot more expensive. But our policy is for the whole building and the common areas. So, and I'm not trying to defend it, but I mean, we go to 3 or 4, we've got to do it through brokers. We do it through 3 or 4 brokers, and we can really make much difference in terms of the premium rate. It's a good source of income.
Why have my factors fees gone up 40 to 50% over the last 4 years?
They are from Newton?
Yeah, so I've got one in Main Street, Bridgeton.
And your management fees?
So I'm £120 a month now, my direct debit. I think it used to be 80.
Yeah.
And that not so long ago. It just seems since COVID and coming out of that,
I couldn't
things have gone
really explain that.
I'm speaking about it specific here, but I think generally across the board, I'm not just talking about Newton, I'm talking about the whole industry. Fees seem... I just want you to dive into a wee bit about the back runnings and the costs involved in running a factoring business.
I think that one of the reasons, and you know, I think sometimes factors can be a bit loose with maybe who they instruct. We don't take a brown... I've got a great business. I'm not going to ruin my business for taking a penny packet off a roofer. I'm not doing that. And some do it. Some still do it, and it's very illegal. But the next thing I think is that over the last 10 or 15 years, we as factors and all factors really have to use reputable, contractors, and they have their insurance and they're compliant, and we get our building surveyors to interview them to make sure they do everything. So as a consequence of that, the cost of repairs are much higher.
So what you're saying maybe is, like, used to be able to get away with getting best value by using the guy with the van sort of thing, one man band sort of thing, but now you have to go to the company, and obviously they've got staff, processes, systems, all the rest of it, which then filters down.
I would say that probably is the reason. I also think that building insurance has gone through the roof. If you're looking at your monthly cost of £120 a month, I bet your building insurance has probably doubled.
It's the reinstatement values of the development cost of it, because I got a few policies that I was underinsured, and you look back, you're underinsured, and you looked at the reinstatement value had went up 50% over the last 5-6 years.
I have to say we don't play that game because that can be quite common, that it can be a little bit loose and generous what the reinstatement value is. But the insurance, I think, is a big one. And a lot of the insurance companies are less keen to deal with block insurance. You think about it, if you're in the 10th floor and there's a leak, it'll affect 10 flats below. So it's not so popular with insurance companies. And what do? They say, of course we'll do it, but it's more expensive. And I'm not blaming everybody. I would like to think that we could try to get costs down, and I would like to think that we could try to get our insurance premiums down as well.
Yeah, I think there is a place for factors. I mean, I've just gave the go ahead to a roof repair on 4 flats on Union Street I've got in Aberdeen, and to get that to that point, one of the flats has been empty for a year because of the roof leak that's affected my flat. And okay, I've probably been a bit slack on it, but if that was a factor block, that would have been pushed on and rectified a lot quicker because it would have been all managed in-house.
It would have been, but maybe it's a little bit of an assumption. I have seen cases and within ourselves where you can find out that one of our lovely property managers has kind of given up on it, and they've lost the momentum. So it's not unique to owner occupiers.
I would say I would rather have a factor than not. I would say obviously I've got properties that are unfactored and they're an absolute nightmare. They become very difficult to let because first impressions, they walk into the close and there's broken windows, walls graffitied, lights no working, all the rest of it.
It's maybe not direct comparison on it, but there's the block I've got factored. I've got a couple of flats in it with Newton's up at the top end of Union Street, the west end, the better end, Union Street. When we first took that property on, there was a roof repair that was almost 200 grand outstanding, and like you say, as transparent as it is, there's your cost of Newton's factoring fee to project manage the roof repair at 17 grand, and then there's an application fee to apply for Aberdeen City Council for their approved contractors that gives you the grant, which obviously then is through the fucking roof on what they charge. And I'm looking at going, this is a 200 grand roof repair, and I've just got mine done for 17 grand, but it'd take a year to get over the line, and this one's still not ongoing. But you can see what the difference is for both sides. That one could be an expensive roof repair, but then you have to use reputable contractors to come in and do it. I'm having to go and get a few smaller businesses that have got less overheads to get the price down to
and the funny thing as well is that in Aberdeen, what I do notice is it's very expensive. It's much more expensive than it is in the west of Scotland. There's not the proliferation of small contractors, small kind of established contractors that want to do these factoring, because they all want to go and work in oil related businesses where they can earn 60 grand a year.
But then
instead of 16.
I've used this a lot of times where I'll bring guys up from down in Fife or even Glasgow, and you'll put them up in the hotel for weeks, and it's still thousands cheaper just to do a flat renovation. Like, this is insane.
We're coming to the end, but one of the other things I wanted to touch on is debt, chasing customers for debt recovery, and that whole debt of a development going on to the burden of the other owners as well. So first of all, like, I've bought properties before where you see it's like a potential notice of liability where the previous owner hasn't paid the factors fees that's accumulated, and that new owner either needs to take it on or the development as a full. Is that fair?
I think it's quite fair. But we're also guided by the tribunal, because if we, they do insist that, that we can't just let it build up and then 5 years later then try and distribute among. I mean, we act for the co-owners. You are a co-owner. You're one of, say, 8 in a building. It's not our building. We've got to manage it. If we manage it badly, then you can sack us.
We had Brian Gilmore on the podcast. Indigo Square does a bit of factoring as well. And one of our most viewed ever social media clips that went on TikTok and went viral was that he was complaining about, if I have somebody who's not paying their factors fees, I can do all that I want, take it to court, get the sheriff officers, try and get it in the bank account and all the rest of it. But if they don't want to pay it, there's not a heck of a lot I can do. So what do you do to try and get the money back?
Well, we do. We've got quite an active credit control department. And oddly enough, we'd lost a couple of people at the tail end of last year and into this year. And what a difference it made in our collections. It really went through the floor. We're back on again. We then move on to a debt collection company, and then we go legal. But we've got some howlers in there as well. Brian's got a point that where people just don't. It amazes me. Yeah, I can think of one where somebody's in a high-end flat who's never paid us, who's been in there. We can't even repossess the house because the mortgage is above the value of the property. On behalf of the co-owners, it's a dog's breakfast. And I'd like to think that we could do more. I kind of think we maybe could do more. And I think it's probably, first and foremost, it's about trying to nip it in the bud and not letting a £100 bill get to a £1,500 bill. Because as soon as they get to 1,000 or 15, they've given up. Yeah. So that's
in terms of doing more, or, if you had, if you were speaking to, whoever it is, housing minister or whatever, government people, is there anything that you would want to change in the industry?
I'm not sure in terms of the factors industry.
Obviously, you're talking about regulation or the rest of it. Then you've got the first tier tribunal or the rest of it. I know about the first tier tribunal, right? We've got cases going through. I mean, it's an absolute nightmare. It takes ages. It's actually a good system, but it's not funded and resourced properly.
Yeah.
So the length of time.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that one of my kind of irritants about the business is that the sector is that, I think we need more regulation. I think a factor's client account should be audited every year. The amount of money that's held in a factor's client account is humongous. And interestingly, of the 14 or 15 companies that I bought, 12 of them had a hole in their client account or nothing in their client account.
Wow.
And
so these are missing floats that possibly people...
These are floats.
So like when you buy a property, you're asked to pay 250, 300 pounds, whatever.
And to be honest, quite rightly, because we can't fund that 40 million.
I understand.
So
that money is basically missing.
A lot of the time. I would 80% of the time.
Wow.
And that's something that I'm quite passionate. I'd like to see more control.
Yeah.
Even the government don't have to do anything. That maybe just the factors accountants every year have to do an audit of their float account.
There's not a deposit scheme for
what?
There's not a deposit scheme for a factor.
No, well, it couldn't be because we need the float. The float's really like a quarter month's payments in advance.
Oh, yeah.
That's
so
what
when you're
allows
acquiring these companies, presumably you have to be then taking on.
I love that.
Negotiating.
I love that, and then we find out there's a hole in the float. That just comes off the price,
exactly.
And we make it up. Right. So and there's
okay. Lastly, finish off, Stephen. You've been great with your time. Biggest mistake you've ever made in business, and how do you learn from it?
I can't honestly recall any major mistakes.
Or anything looking back on it, if you were giving advice to your younger self.
I think it's important, if I'm giving advice to my younger self, is not to be reckless, not to go on a whim. Always stop and do your homework. Just run the numbers all the time. Even just in a little bit of paper. Just run and give a wee bit more clarity as to what you're doing and what it's going to cost, and be realistic about how much it will cost. I've not really had any great problems in my business life. Remember, not every day is a sunny day in business. There are more stormy days than sunny days. But I've not really had one that's been a howler.
And what's next for Newton Property?
Next for Newton is I'd like to expand. As I said, it's a generational business. What I do wonder though, what happens with a generational business and all of a sudden it's worth 100 million? That's a difficult conundrum.
But what's that for inheritance tax?
No, 100. no, it then has a value of 100 million, or somebody's chapping your door. But I want to continue to grow. I want to be so much better. And I do want to be bigger, and I want it to be a place of, we do great things for the staff loan schemes. We pay for therapy. Today there'll be lunch in the office. The end of the month when people are skint, we get caterers in, fill the fridges up. We try and be a great employer, and I want just to be better and better. And the better I can be, I'm going to be pulling in, but I might not have to be buying so much business, because if I can be that bloody good, I'll be taking business off all my competition, and I may not need to invest in the money to buy businesses. I might just be getting it through my abilities.
What keeps you excited, Stephen, almost 70-year-old, still excited to get up every day and drive this business and grow this business and make it better?
I think the thing in business is what we do is generally quite dull. It's actually winning. It's getting a deal. It's getting a project. It's employing it's seeing somebody get on. And that's what drives me every day. I love it. I sit and I think, I do this, I do all about this. And, it's just, it's always churning around in my brain. And I don't think it's ever going to lose. I'm ever going to lose it.
No more gap years to Bali then for 8 years.
No, I don't think so. That was a great chapter in my life. Yeah. But I would like to do a TED Talk though. He's not
allowed back into Bali. He's been actually. Where can people reach out if they want to get in touch? Obviously, if they're looking for a factor or whatever.
newtonproperty.co.uk.
On the website.
Yep. And, if they want to get in touch with me, hey, Stephen, Stephen at newtonproperty.co.uk. Delighted to take any.
Or you'll find them on Tinder as well.
And reach out for your TED Talks.
Or through LinkedIn. Brilliant. And, I'm happy to, I bought a business on the back of a deal where a guy started a business in Aberdeen, Ross. He phoned me some advice. I said, it's a pity you're not in Glasgow. He said, I'm in Glasgow tomorrow. I said, come down, you come in. We spent a long, young guy in business, started a factors business. And he wrote me a lovely email after the meeting. He said, if there's anything I aspire to be in business, it's you.
Fantastic.
And then we bought his business and he's now left and gone on to great things. He's a very successful guy. I want to be welcoming and supportive. Even if they're in competition.
That's great. Well, on behalf of our listeners, thanks very much. I think it's a great value in that podcast, so appreciate your time.
I loved it. Thank you so much, guys. That was brilliant.
Thank you very much, Stephen.